You're listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Keane. I'm the editor-in-chief of the internationally renowned journal Fire Ecology. I will soon be the editor-in-chief as Jeff Kane is going to be taking over next month. But I get the pleasure of having some of the few last podcasts. And this one is incredibly dear and near to my heart. It's a wilderness fire podcast about a very, very interesting paper that just came out in Fire Ecology. And the title of that paper is When the Wilderness Burns, an analysis of current fire management and the case for prescribed fire in designated wildernesses in the United States. And today we have two authors of that paper here. We have Alyssa Worsham and Jonathan Coop. Alyssa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. My name is Alyssa Worsham. I'm an alumna of the Master in Environmental Management program at Western Colorado University, and this research is one component of my year-long master's project in the MEM program. I should also note that I'm now a U.S. Forest Service employee, but this research was conducted prior to my current role, and today's conversation is in my personal capacity, not official government capacity. And with me is Jonathan Coop, who is one of my advisors for the project, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Coop here. I'm a professor at Western Colorado University in Gunnison, Colorado, and I work on fire and forest ecology.
Very good. Welcome to the Forest Service. Let's start off with you, Alyssa. Can you give us a little thumbnail sketch of what the paper's all about?
Sure. U.S. wilderness areas are some of the most protected landscapes in the world, but they're currently being degraded by a century of fire exclusion and the effects of climate change. And our research surveyed and interviewed land managers across the United States and found there's broad support for fire in wilderness areas. However, it's nearly impossible to let fire to play its natural role. So we need more fire of the right kind, and prescribed fire is one of the best tools that we have to shrink the gap between existing and ideal conditions.
Yeah, really, it's a great paper, and I really enjoyed reading it. Jonathan, what led you to take the approaches that you did in the paper?
Yeah, well, I'm a fire ecologist, so for me, this was a really fascinating way to explore some of the reasons why we see the things we do on the ground that are ultimately the product of human decisions. The Wilderness Act calls for wilderness to be managed to be untrammeled and natural, but also provides that, quote, such measure may be taken as may be necessary in the control of fire. And this has been interpreted to allow fire suppression, which represents both a direct trammeling of wilderness ecosystems, but also drives them away from natural conditions. So how did we get here, and how do we maybe get back to a better relationship with wilderness? And really that just comes down to the decisions people make. And this research explores the why behind those decisions.
Yeah, the big thing when I did wilderness research in fire was somebody told me and they asked me what I thought wilderness meant. And I said, if I don't see a fire plume, to me, wilderness should have that fire plume, and that is the wilderness experience. So, in your paper, Alyssa, what were the key findings?
Yeah, so I actually would like to share a quote from one of our research participants that's a great follow-up to what you just mentioned. And what they said was, if we could allow more lightning strikes to burn in wilderness, we could see fire regimes adapting to climate change a lot better. And we ideally want to let nature be in charge, but we're past the tipping point in some places where it's too dangerous to let these lightning strikes burn. And that was from a National Park Service interviewee. And really, we just heard over and over again about the natural role of fire and the idea that natural ignition wildfires are allowed to burn as long as they don't threaten values at risk. However, full suppression is used a majority of the time for managing fires in wilderness. And we also found that a majority of participants wanted to see full suppression used less often and prescribed fire used more often.
Yeah, what I hated is the fact that it was easy for them to go ahead and put out wilderness fires when they could allow them to burn. It was the moistest time of the year. So they would always send people in wilderness and not let those beautiful early season fires burn and create the patchwork that we needed. So, such an interesting paper, Jonathan. How do you think the results will be used by scientists and managers?
Yeah, well, the objective of this project, and I'll mention that this paper was part of a larger initiative that we kicked off with Dr. Sean Parks, who was formerly at the Aldo Leopold Wilderness Research Institute. And it involved this paper. There's a couple other papers that were led by Dr. Claire Borrichter. We also held a workshop and produced a white paper that included a number of recommendations to facilitate better fire management in wilderness, or more ecologically appropriate fire management that might restore some of the trammeling of fire exclusion and also maintain in the natural conditions, historical role of fire that we see in those places. So the entire purpose of this work was to provide information and support to wilderness and fire managers who are interested maybe in rethinking a little bit how we interpret the Wilderness Act in an era of global environmental change when every single square centimeter of wilderness is influenced in some way, shape, or form by humans directly through climate, but also through fire exclusion. And where we also are learning more and more that many of these wilderness areas or places that we have designated as wilderness now are someone's historical homeland, and indigenous peoples were in there stewarding these places, often with fire for millennia. And often that influence led to some of the attributes that we really value in these ecosystems now, the reasons why they're set aside as wilderness.
Yeah, well, I was reading this paper. The first thing I thought was that if anybody is really interested in wilderness and fire, they have to read this paper because it really covers a lot of the issues that are important today. So to end up, would you like to recognize any funding agencies or co-authors?
Yes, please. We'd like to recognize our two other co-authors on the paper. That's Dagny Signorelli, who's also an alum of the Masters of Science in Ecology program at Western Colorado University, and Dr. Melanie Armstrong, who was my graduate advisor and instrumental in helping us develop the study thanks to her experience in social science research. We'd also like to thank the research participants who contributed their knowledge through surveys and interviews. We learned a lot from them. And finally, Dr. Sean Parks, formerly of the Alder Leopold Wilderness Research Institute and funding from the Rocky Mountain Research Station.
Well, thank you both for coming on and sharing the results of your study with all of us. I really appreciate your time. If anybody is interested in this paper, guess what? You can download it for free. I mean, free, yeah, it won't cost you a cent because these two have already paid the freight for you to download the paper. So all you have to do if you want to learn about wilderness and fire and read one of the most important papers in this area that's been written in a while, please download it from our Fire Ecology website and you can have it at your beck and call. So if you're interested in more great issues like this and great papers like this, please come tune into the next Fire Ecology Chat.
Thank you for listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our show and leave us a review. To learn more about fire ecology and support our future work by becoming a member, visit fireecology.org. fireecology.org.